Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Blade Runner, starring Harrison Ford, Rutger Hauer, Sean Young, Edward James Olmos, M. Emmett Walsh, Daryl Hannah, William Sanderson, Brian James, and Joe Turkel, and directed by Ridley Scott. Now, before I get into this review, I'm just glad that Ridley Scott's not doing the newest Blade Runner movie because it looks better without him. Let's get into it. I love the world of November 2019 and the way it looks with its views and cars flying around. Everything about it is gorgeous in my mind. A robot which is called a replicant, which looks a hell of a lot like a human, shoots a Blade Runner named Mr. Holden and switches over to the next scene, which, don't worry, I watched this on digital download and it switches like that in every cut. Rick Deckard, played by Harrison Ford, is getting arrested and taken to his former Blade Runner boss. Brian was a great introduction to Deckard, but in the theatrical cut, there were times when he narrated what things were and what they're supposed to do, and how he feels about shooting a replicant woman later in the film. But in the director's cut, in the final cut, yes, I watched all three of them 3 times each. Well, not 3, but 2 times each. He doesn't narrate a damn thing, but I would prefer the narration, to be honest. If someone can't understand what the fuck is going on, and then watch the theatrical cut first, in my mind. Because that's probably the best way that you can watch the movie at this point. We get introduced to Rachel, played by Sean Young, who, when watching this movie, I wasn't sure if she was a replicant or not, but she's an advanced replicant. But by the end, she's both human and replicant, like, let me just rephrase this, an upgraded replicant. An advanced one, may I say. And that was a mystery throughout the movie. I love the character of Rachel, and Sean Young was the perfect casting choice because I couldn't get my eyes off her. Rutger Hauer as Roy is a very menacing character, like when he faces off against Deckard and squishing people's heads, and I thought in the last battle Deckard was fucked. But we'll get there when we get there. The score in this movie, like Terminator by the way, is very futuristic in the 80s. That back then, and this takes place 2 years before 2019, which is our current year, almost 2 years from now. That's what the future sounded like, and I like that about the score in this movie. Pris, played by Daryl Hannah, gets introduced to J.L. Sebastian, and to be clear, Daryl Hannah's character scares the living hell out of me, especially when she puts on, I'm guessing, his eyeliner on her face, and she's just as menacing as Roy, but Roy's a little scarier. I also haven't seen Daryl Hannah in anything since Quentin Tarantino's Kill Bill movies. The chase between some replicant woman that I brought up earlier when Harrison Ford narrates it, who I've never gotten a name, I think it's something, I forget what it was now, of, and Deckard was a very short but a really interesting way to find out she was obsessed with snakes until she gets killed by Deckard. It's another thing that she's a replicant, you know? The fight scene between Deckard and Leon was an intense fight until Rachel shoots Leon's ass down. The way Deckard abuses and kisses Rachel and was kind of like, okay, what the fuck is happening here? Just let it be the sci-fi movie without romance, and that'll be a problem when I get to Star Wars, at least. Sebastian, who was this friend we met with Deckard, and who has a friend we meet with Deckard and Rachel named Dr. Tyrell, or Mr. Tyrell, let me rephrase that, who gets killed by Roy, was a very brutal way for Mr. Tyrell to die by his creation. Deckard almost gets his ass beaten up by Pris until Pris does her gymnastics move, and Deckard shoots her twice, and I felt, that's a very hard way to die. The fight afterhand between Deckard and Roy was much more brutal. because Roy breaks Deckard's fingers, and I was like, damn, that's gotta fucking hurt. And Roy chases Deckard all over the house until they get to the roof, and suddenly Deckard was on the corner, and Roy gets to the point where Deckard almost fell, and he should have killed Deckard by stepping on his legs, but nope, he lets him up and just lives. Like, are you fucking serious? And suddenly Roy dies, and that's the end of the fight. Like, what? That was a little unrealistic in my mind. The director's cut and the final cut end with Deckard and Rachel leaving Deckard's apartment and doesn't show the daylight like the theatrical cut. So if you want a happy ending, go ahead and watch the theatrical cut in my mind. Now it's time for the rating. I'll give this movie a 8.8 out of 10. This is a great movie with a mystery of which ending is the real ending. The characters were very good. I love the world and the score for this movie, and I'm looking forward to next week's movie. I actually heard that it got pretty good ratings from Rotten Tomatoes so far, but I'm not going to get into that until I watch the movie. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me, and I'll be back next week with Blade Runner 2049, and until next time, don't let a replicant kill you.